Waddie Welcome and the beloved community, Tom Kohler and Susan Earl.
The beloved community is not a utopia, but a place where the barriers between people gradually come down, and where the citizens make a constant effort to address even the most difficult problems of ordinary people. It is, above all else, an idealistic community. Reverend Jim Lawson.
Well, thank you very much for being with us tonight. We appreciate it. And the purpose of our time together this evening is to tell a story about a man named Waddie Welcome in a place called the beloved community. Just a few points to get started. One would be there'll be 2 times during the presentation tonight when the screen goes blank. When that happens, we'd ask that you do what we call your deepest listening. Different people listen deeply in different ways. Some people actually just sort of close their eyes so that their ears can do more of the work. Other people sometimes like to put their hands in their lap and maybe look up. But however you do your deep listening, when the screen goes blank and then Susan comes to speak, that's the time for deep listening. My role really is to just kind of move us through the story. The second thing just to say is that we're telling the story as we understand it, and it's really a lot of different stories that took place over a really long time. We weren't there for all of it by any means. Also, this is bigger than a citizen advocacy story. You'll meet Mr. Lester Johnson, who's a citizen advocate, who's in the story, but this is really a story about Mr. Welcome in our community. And the story, as I say, is at least a story that spans eight decades. Also, we would not usually tell a person's story in such detail, maybe, but particularly in the later part of his life, Mr. Welcome realized that he did have a message, and his family has seen this and feel like that it's respectful and are comfortable with it. As you listen to the story tonight, we'd ask that you maybe think about 3 things. One would be the idea of valued social roles, and all that means is a valued social role is something we do in our community and in our life that people appreciate about us. So for example, right now I'm playing a valued social role. I'm playing the role of presenter. And earlier today I was playing a valued social role. I was out buying some stuff for tonight. So I was out spending money. I was a consumer. When I go home, or see my daughter, I'm a father. So the idea of valued social roles, and maybe think about the different valued social roles that you see tonight, particularly with regard to Mr. Welcome. The second thing we'd like you to think about is an old-fashioned word, and that word is virtue. We hardly ever hear that word anymore, virtue. But if you notice things that are virtuous in this story, again, we'd ask you to maybe think a little bit about that. And then the third thing would be the idea of protection and the idea of advocacy. Waddie Welcome was born on the 4th of July in 1914 in Sylvania, Georgia, one of 5 brothers and 2 sisters. His mother and father, Carrie and Henry Welcome, moved to Savannah in the mid-1920s. They settled on Battery Street in the Kohler community, now called the Kohler-Brownsville community, which is just to the southwest of our downtown Savannah, as all of you know. And just to give you some feel for the community that Mr. Welcome grew up in, Second Bethlehem Baptist Church, just to the east of the neighborhood. And you'll see that these folks serve dinners every day, and devil crabs, potato salad, southern cuisine, baked and fried chicken, turkey wings, red rice, collards, green beans, string beans, macaroni, and chitlins. We'll tell you that when we tell this story in Minnesota and in New York and in Toronto and places like that, when we get to the chitlins part, people seem a little confused. This is Juanita's Seafood. These are just some photos of the Kohler-Brownsville neighborhood to give you just a little feel for the neighborhood that Mr. Welcome grew up in. And in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and up until the 60s, this neighborhood was more prominent than you see it now, more middle-class, African-American middle-class neighborhood. And certainly in that era, many of the people that were active in the civil rights movement locally and some people who were active in the civil rights movement nationally had their roots in the Kohler-Brownsville community. In the 70s and 80s and 90s, the neighborhood did begin to be a little more rougher, absentee landlordism and the things that happened to in-town neighborhoods, certainly. The neighborhood, like all urban neighborhoods, has sort of a daytime life and a nighttime life, as you will, and Mr. Welcome's neighborhood no different. I would say, though, Sharon's lounge here, I would say, though, that Mr. Welcome preferred untaxed spirits, we'll call them, to taxed spirits. And he did love to drink in the company of men huddled together, sometimes a 55-gallon barrel. You've seen this cut out with a fire in it, that kind of thing. This is a Savannah Checkers Club in Mr. Welcome's neighborhood. It costs $1 to be a member. The sign there, you'll see they used to have bottle caps up on there, you know, like Pepsi caps and Coke caps and that kind of thing, but neighborhood kids came and, you know, pulled them off and all that. And when you saw guys playing checkers in the neighborhoods, you know, a lot of times they'd be using bottle caps and that kind of thing. This is Jerusalem Baptist Church. The Kohler Brownsville neighborhood is in fact dotted with churches of all kinds. This church, probably hand-built by its membership. You figure the folks that went to church here worked with their hands for a living, were masons and carpenters and plumbers and that sort of thing. So the church hand-built, most likely by its membership. And you'll notice the revival sign, clearly hand-painted. This is not a corporate neighborhood. This is not a neighborhood where there's a lot of money, but this is a neighborhood where there's a lot of resourcefulness. People know how to pull together, get by, and do what needs to be done. You might notice on the sign here, about 3/4 of the way down on the sign, you'll notice right above where it says guest speaker, you can see how there's like a bright white line that goes across there, a little bit difference in the coloration of the sign. When a new guest speaker came, they would just paint over the old guest speaker and put the new guest speaker. And so the sign year after year after year with a new guest speaker. And again, just a sign of how resourceful and, you know, how careful people had to be in this neighborhood. This is the house that Mr. Welcome grew up in, and the porch is really important to take note of. Carrie Welcome, Mr. Welcome's mother, had what's called a treats store. And are there people here who know what a treats store is in Savannah? Great, yeah. And so this is a store where usually the woman of the house would make cakes and cookies and maybe buy a big thing of pickles and have those available, maybe freeze pops in her refrigerator, in her freezer, that kind of thing. And she would sell these to the neighborhood kids. Most of the time it would be advertised, if you will, by a piece of shirt cardboard. How many people here are old enough to remember what shirt cardboard is? A piece of shirt cardboard with the word treats written on it, tacked to the newel post would be usually the way it would be advertised. Mr. Welcome's first job was here, and he kept an eye on the store for his mother. And if somebody came and bought something off of the front porch and didn't put their money in the jar, the honor system, Mr. Welcome would make a big commotion and his mom would come out and square things up. This is Connor's Temple on the northeastern corner of the neighborhood, and Mr. and Mrs. Welcome, Mr. Welcome's mom and dad, and all their children were members. Henry Welcome, Mr. Welcome's dad, was a deacon in the church, and he also taught Sunday school and was an usher. He also was a man who was blind, and he had committed huge portions of the Bible to memory and was played a very important and valued role in the congregation. When Mr. Welcome first moved into the neighborhood, this was the Wage Earners Bank, more recently now the Ralph Mark Gilbert Civil Rights Museum. Again, on the northeastern corner of the neighborhood, the Wage Earners Bank established by African American folks for African American folks during the time of segregation in the American South. Well, this is Waddie Welcome when I met him in the mid-1980s, and he was living at the Heritage Park Nursing Home at the time, and he had lived with his family for 70 years and then wound up being placed there. I didn't know any of that. I just met Mr. Welcome because I was walking around in the nursing home, which is what I sometimes do as part of my job. I was just kind of walking around trying to be a little quiet and sort of see who was who, and I noticed Mr. Welcome in the day room, and he sort of noticed me, and I could tell he had cerebral palsy. And since our work involves people with developmental disabilities, I kind of went over and tried to get a little conversation going and couldn't. And so then I kind of wheeled him into his bedroom and got him positioned, you know, so I could try to have a little conversation with him. And I leaned down and said, you know, hello, my name is Tom Kohler. Can you tell me your name? And he'd look at me and he would try to speak, and I couldn't understand what he was saying, and then he would kind of, you know, stop concentrating and look over my shoulder, and being the trained professional I am, I got a little closer and talked a little louder. Hello, my name is, and went through all that, and Mr. Welcome would try, and then he'd look over my shoulder and stop paying attention, and being the trained professional I am, a little closer, a little louder, and trying to make you know, all that. And then he's over my shoulder, and I looked over my shoulder, and my knees just kind of buckled, because what I saw when I looked over my shoulder was a California cruising poster, because I had shut the door, and when I shut the door, you could see what was behind the door. And up on that wall was a California cruising poster. Now, I know that you good folks don't know what that is, so I'll tell you. A California cruising poster is a poster that has a picture of 3 young women wearing string bikinis. They're wearing string bikinis, and they're in the back of a pickup truck, and they're leaning over the front of the pickup truck. And I'm just going to tell you, the camera is not at the front of the pickup truck. And so I did like this and looked back, and this man laughed at me as hard as anybody can laugh at anybody else. And so I remember thinking, oh, I'm getting a little bit of an idea about who you are. Well, I did try to recruit a citizen advocate for Mr. Welcome, and I asked 39 people, and 39 people said no. And that took a long time. So 39 people were invited to meet this man and try to think about ways that they could help him make his life be better in the future. And 39 people said no. During that time, the state closed the Heritage Park nursing home because of health and safety violations, and I can promise you the state of Georgia hates to do that, because if they close the nursing home, then they have to figure out what to do with the 150 people in the nursing home. So I'm just saying that to say it must have been pretty horrible for the state to actually close the nursing home down. So Mr. Welcome was social worked out of Savannah, 3 hours away, to Abbeville, Georgia. And when I discovered that, I drove over to Abbeville and found Mr. Welcome, and he didn't look very different than the way you see here and look here. A nursing home is a nursing home is a nursing home. It was in an abandoned school building, the nursing home. The nursing home had actually been the African-American elementary school. And then when integration came, it fell into disrepair, and now is the nursing home in that county. While I was over in Abbeville to meet Mr. Welcome, I did find an envelope in that little nightstand next to his bed, that little teeny bit of private space that people get when they live in a nursing home. And so I opened the drawer and I found a letter, and that letter was addressed to Waddie Welcome, Abbeville Nursing Home, and then the return address said A. Reeves, 112 Waltz Drive, Savannah, Georgia, 31401. So I took out my little piece of paper I keep in my pocket because I don't know how to use a computer very well, and I wrote down that address, and I wrote down A. Reeves. And then the other thing I did that day is I said to Mr. Welcome, Mr. Welcome, would you like to come back to Savannah? And I can tell you that really every bone in his body said yes. So I did come back to Savannah with those 2 things in mind. Well, I got back to Savannah, as I said, and I looked in the phone book. How many people can remember those? I looked in the phone book, and I found a phone number for Addie Reeves, and I called it. We did have punch button, not rotary. You know, right? And she said, hello. I said, hello, my name is Tom Kohler, and I work for Chatham Savannah Citizen Advocacy, and you know, we are involved with people who have, and she says, is this about Waddie Welcome? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, come on over. And I said, well, no, ma'am, because remember, I'm a trained professional in an appointment. And so I tried to describe what I was doing again, and she said, is this about Mr. Welcome? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, come on over. And I said, no, ma'am, because I'm a trained professional. And then about 30 minutes later, I found myself standing on the steps of 1112 Waltz Drive in Yamacraw Village. All right, now, I am not proud of the next part of this, but I'm just going to tell it to you anyway. You know, I grew up in Savannah, as many of you did. And when I was growing up, the word Yamacraw was used as a code word for the worst of it. And I hadn't spent much time in Yamacraw Village, quite frankly. But there I was on the backside of Yamacraw Village, and there was a beautiful big oak tree back there, several that I had never imagined. Miss Reeves had a lovely little cast iron bench out on her porch, and you could see the Talmadge Bridge, very pleasant, you know. Knock, knock, knock. Come on in, and I did. Want some cake? No, ma'am. Want some cake? No, ma'am. Want some cake? Yes, ma'am. Now, I would soon learn that this form of communication, Mrs. Reeves telling you what you wanted before you even know that you wanted it, that this was kind of her standard operating procedure between Mrs. Reeves and really a wide array of people. Some of you may have maybe grandmothers or maybe great aunts who have this ability to tell you what you want before you even know you want it. Now, Ms. Reeves did tell me about herself. She'd come to Savannah from the deeply rural Burke County. The mule knew when to stop plowing at night. About working for Savannah Sugar, sewing sugar bags for 5 cents an hour. About working at Blanton's Travel Motel on Highway 17. They were good to me, but the day she couldn't pay me was the day that I had to leave. And about walking to work from Yamacraw to Port Wentworth, about 5 miles each way. Ms. Reeves also told me about being the oldest member of Connor's Temple, about the pastor's wife's hymnline, too high, of course, and about meeting Mr. Wlcome's father, Henry, in the 1920s. He was a deacon and told me to stop betting. I told him I wasn't betting, I was just playing Bolita, which is a numbers game, right? And he told me that that too was gambling. And so when Ms. Reeves stopped gambling, she was able to save a little money and kind of things got better for her. And so she was welcomed into the Wlcome family, if you will. She also told me that when Waddie's mother, Carrie, had died over 40 years earlier, that she had told Carrie that she would watch over her son, Waddie. Mrs. Reeves was now 85 years old. She clearly loved Mr. Wlcome, but she was a better worrier and lover than she was a bureaucracy chaser. So I continued to look for a citizen advocate for Mr. Wlcome, someone who would try to bring him back here and then bring him back home. I had known Lester Johnson, who's here with us tonight. I had known Lester through Leadership Savannah in the late 1970s and early 80s. I called Lester and explained the situation a bit, and he was immediately willing to get involved after he heard Mr. Wlcome's story. And he, in fact, was going to be in Brunswick the next week at a lawyers' conference. And so we agreed that Mrs. Reeves and I would pick him up in Brunswick. We would drive over to Abbeville, meet Mr. Wlcome, and then, you know, see what happened. And so we did, and went over to meet Mr. Wlcome together. And on the way back, there was no question. Lester said that he was ready and willing to become Mr. Wlcome's citizen advocate. And you know, as many of you know Lester, he has a wide network of people here in Savannah, and as an attorney, he knows how to cut through red tape. And so we were pleased that he accepted that role. Lester would get Mr. Wlcome back, would try to get Mr. Wlcome back to Savannah, and that would turn out to mean getting to know Mrs. Reeves better, making lots of phone calls, filling out lots of paperwork just for a local nursing home, Westview Nursing Home in Port Wentworth. At the last minute, it meant paying $300 for an ambulance to bring Mr. Wlcome back from Abbeville. And that was because Mr. Wlcome had used up all of his Medicaid miles being sent away from Savannah. And so there were no Medicaid miles left for him to come home. So Lester was able to write a check and handle that. Bringing Mr. Wlcome back to Savannah set the stage for a much longer journey, and that was bringing Mr. Wlcome back home. And here you see Lester and Becky Cheatham, chair of our board at the time. You see Mr. Wlcome and Ms. Reeves at one of our annual meetings. And here you see Mr. Wlcome and his brother Willie. Willie was the only other of the Wlcome brothers who stayed in Savannah. Right after this photo was taken, unfortunately, Willie passed away, and that was, of course, a great loss for Waddie. And as you can see, Mr. Wlcome's beginning to look a little bit more like a jazz musician who maybe had too much fun in the early part of his life. Here you see Mr. Wlcome with Carmela Alifi, who teaches at St. Vincent's, and Gene Downs, who was the entertainment editor for the Savannah Morning News at the time, and Mrs. Williams, I believe that is, who was a member at Connor's Temple. You see Jane Fishman, that many of us know, over at the far right there, And Jane and Mrs. Reeves had a good thing going. You know, Jane, as you know, has a garden on Boundary Street, and Mrs. Reeves lived on Gwinnett near Boundary, and so Jane would grow the collards and Ms. Reeves would cook them. And it worked out quite well. And there you see Mr. Welcome. And then you see Mr. Welcome and Ms. Reeves at one of our coverage suppers. And we added this slide in because it shows you one of Mrs. Reeves' very powerful tools of hospitality. Mrs. Reeves always carried a big purse with her whenever she went anywhere. And among the things that she had in that purse would be 50 or 60 pieces of peppermint. And so Mrs. Reeves would walk into a room and she'd look around, and if she saw someone who wasn't paying attention, she would throw a piece of peppermint right at them, just like that. And you'll notice that we actually have caught her hand in motion. This is an action shot, people. Appreciate what you're seeing here. This is an action shot. So during this time, the mid-'80s and through the early 1990s, Mr. Welcome was just living in a congregate nursing facility here in Savannah, and Lester was his citizen advocate. Lester also became Mr. Welcome's representative payee, which means that he managed and guided Mr. Welcome's financial affairs. He also acquired a medical power of attorney after an incident where Mr. Welcome was sent to a local emergency room, and the ER doctor was trying to put a do not resuscitate order on Mr. Welcome. He was being told that Mr. Welcome had no family and friends. It turns out that a staff member at the emergency room broke the rules and did the right thing. And sometimes we have to do that. We have to break the rules to do the right thing. She remembered that she had heard from a friend of hers about a man that her friend had met. And so she called Lester and said, "I can't visit." And he said, "Yeah, that's the man I was talking to you about." And so Lester left his office and went to the hospital and squared things up. And then that weekend, he went back and with Jeff Alden, and they talked with Mr. Welcome to find out what Mr. Welcome wanted. And it turned out that you could ask Mr. Welcome yes, no questions. And by doing that, Mr. Welcome could tell you what he wanted. And so I don't know, but it probably went something like this, you know. And Mr. Welcome, you know, there are lots of different ways people think about being in the hospital, and there are lots of different things that doctors sometimes have to do. Sometimes a doctor will have to put a tube down somebody's throat, and some people want that because they think it'll give them a chance to keep living and maybe get better. Other people feel like that's really not what they want, and if that's the way they feel, the doctor can honor that. Mr. Welcome, if they need to put a tube down your throat, which will hurt, to try to keep you living, yes, no. So you can look at Mr. Welcome, watch his face, watch his movements, yes. And then, of course, more questions, circle back to the question, ask it again, a little different way, look for confirmation. Well, it turned out that Mr. Welcome was old-fashioned. He thought that the reason you went to the hospital was to get well and go home. He wanted it all. Lester also had to help the administration at a local nursing home notice what was going on to Mr. Welcome and look for also have a staff member reassigned. Again, Mr. Welcome simply living in a congregate care facility here in Savannah. So Mr. Welcome is living in Savannah at Westview Nursing Home. An increasing number of people are getting to know him and getting to know one another. And about this time, he hooks up with a small group of people called the Storytellers.
In 1993, I became one of the founding members of a grassroots organization called the Storytellers, modeled after the Highlander Folk School. Highlander is legendary as the place where the strategy of the civil rights movement was forged. We Shall Overcome, the anthem of the movement, was first sung there. Miles Horton, one of its original founders in the 1930s, understood the importance of creating a space for people to gain personal strength by sharing and learning from each other's stories. The mission of storytellers, through listening to each other's stories and learning each other's dreams, was to build a web of allies that would help some of its members who are living in nursing homes to move into community life. By participating in this process, the social and communal life of all of its members would change. Jillian Grable was known around the state for her work in person-centered planning. We asked her to come to Savannah for a series of work sessions. Several members of Storytellers were anxious to develop circles of support as a first step in planning for lives outside of nursing homes. Waddie Welcome was one of the people in that first work session, and I agreed to be in his group. At that point, we didn't know much about Mr. Welcome except what we had learned from Mrs. Reeves and Lester Johnson. We didn't know if he had any family still living. What we did know was that Mr. Welcome was miserable living at Westview Nursing Home. He was able to make it clear he wanted out. As our group gathered in the corner of the Bull Street Baptist Church social hall that Saturday morning, Waddie Welcome, Deborah Selman, Tom Lamar, Jeff Alden, Dottie Black, and I tried to learn more about what Mr. Welcome wanted. He challenged us to develop a method to understand him. As a group, we quickly learned that he could reliably answer yes or no questions, and that by giving him options to choose from, he could paint a clear picture of what he wanted his life to be like. We took turns writing on large sheets of newsprint tacked to the walls with masking tape. We drew, as much as we wrote, stick figures to represent people important to Mr. Welcome, and quick sketches of buildings, trees, favorite foods. Mr. Welcome was delighted to see his life and ideas come to life in those drawings. Later, we used the wallpaper to help us remember and write what we had discovered. We tried to see the real Waddie Welcome and value him. We worked to define and understand the roles he could play if given the opportunity. Historian, he had seen a lot of history in his 79 years. Teacher, if we could understand what he had to tell us. Dreamer, if he could hold on to his dreams, we'd like to learn how he did it. Community builder, we had no idea how prophetic that would be. When we got it right, he would reward us with a laugh and a delighted smile so big it spurred us on to discover more. Like a puzzle, the more pieces you put together, the clearer the picture becomes. Sometimes when we got it wrong, he laughed too. A determined man, he rarely got frustrated. And the group process worked. When one of us bogged down, another would have an idea. We left that day with several prizes. Knowing we had cracked the communication challenge, learning that Mr. Welcome wanted to live in a house with a family with children, with the smell of food coming from a stove. He was a determined man. And the biggest prize, that if we as a group could figure out how to make it work for Waddie Welcome, a 79-year-old man who had outlived his parents and siblings, then there wasn't anyone in the state of Georgia who could be called too old or too disabled to live in the community. We left with assignments. Learn about Mr. Welcome's preferences, passions, and family, about Kohler Brownsville, his former neighborhood, and neighbors. Learn about his church, about Medicaid waiver programs and other public services. What could they offer him? Deborah Selman, active in the disability rights movement because of a near miss on a nursing home placement herself, became the circle facilitator. She researched Mr. Welcome's family in old copies of Savannah's colored city directory in the public library dating back to 1910. She helped him send Christmas cards to old and new acquaintances to strengthen and enlarge the circle. She badgered Senator Jack Kingston until he sent a representative to visit Mr. Welcome in the nursing home. She reminded other circle members to complete their assignments and keep the momentum going. Along the way, we added members to the circle: State Representative Regina Thomas, Herman and Linda Friedman, local business people, Deacon Washington Hart, Jane Fishman, and Sylvia Kemp, who would provide a place for Mr. Welcome in her home. Mr. Welcome's nieces, Mary Welcome Williams and Margaret Welcome Jackson, and their children were found, and they joined the circle. Once, Lester Johnson, a Muslim, and my daughter and I, who were Jewish, visited Mr. Welcome at the nursing home on Christmas Day and marveled at the strength that our circle's multiculturalism gave us. Mr. Welcome beamed from his preferred place in the hallway near the nurses' station. An astute observer of human nature and a connoisseur of the female form, he commented on the flow of people and events, an arch of one eyebrow, a quick thrust of his tongue. He had a lexicon of language in his face. It took the circle almost 2 years to figure out how to get Mr. Welcome out of the nursing home, including winning the fight for him to be eligible for the Medicaid waiver program. It took polite threats and subtle coercion, but it got done. It didn't hurt that Mr. Welcome's circle now included a state representative, the president of the Savannah Bar Association, a prominent local businessman, a former civil rights leader and historian, and a newspaper reporter among its many members. With funding for the in-home personal care he needed secured, Mr. Welcome moved in with Jeff and Kathy Alden until the family home with children he dreamed of could be found. I was there when Jeff wheeled Mr. Welcome out of the door of the nursing home and gently placed him in the front seat of his truck. My 10-year-old daughter and her friend helped make up Mr. Welcome's bed in Jeff and Kathy's house. I got to take the pictures, and I'll always treasure that afternoon. After all the talking, it was simple, it was quiet, but it was radical social change.
And then Susan says this: we started out meeting together, and then we progressed to having parties. We progressed to having parties. This comes from Susan Earl, who was a teenager, was running the mimeograph machine next to Bayard Rustin and A.J. Musty at the Fellowship for Reconciliation in New York City. They were planning the 1963 March on Washington at that time. That's the march where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. Susan is not a novice to social change. We progressed to having parties. This also mirrors the wisdom of two local people, Neil Foster, a homemaker, a parent, and a visual artist, and also a citizen advocate, once said, you have to keep the social in social change. And then W.W. Law, the most prominent and respected dean of our civil rights movement, who many years ago, when I was fortunate enough to be granted an interview and visit with Mr. Law, I asked him what I think is a good question to ask wizened elders. And I asked him, what scares you the most these days? And without batting an eye, he said, people are so busy going to meetings, they don't have time to visit. And so Deacon Hart and Deborah Selman and John Earl at a Christmas party at Dottie Black's house. And you see young Emily Earl there and Susan taking the pictures. And then folks at the University of Georgia heard about Mr. Welcome, or more correctly, heard about this group of people that had gotten involved and asked if they could make a documentary movie. And Mr. Welcome thought that would be a grand idea. And so Narcelle Reedus came down and shot and produced the film Waddie Welcome, A Man Who Cannot Be Denied. And the film began winning awards all around the country. And Mr. Welcome and some folks from Savannah went up to the Jimmy Carter Center for the premiere of the film. About 300 people turned out that night, a great turnout from legislators and that kind of thing. Mr. Welcome, as always, was kind of working the women. And then a video premiere here at the Ralph Mark Gilbert Civil Rights Museum in Savannah. Mr. Welcome is always sharp, and I would say he's wearing his presidential candidate outfit here. And you'll see Mr. Welcome here with Lester and David Saucy, who was on the Chatham County Commission at the time, in the background there. The screening on the first floor and the reception on the fourth floor. And they did have an elevator, and the elevator was supposed to be accessible. And I guess if your wheelchair was the size of one of the chairs that you folks were sitting in, maybe it was accessible. But if it was the size of the wheelchair that Mr. Cohen uses, it was not accessible. And so accessible in name only. And so Kim Abbott picked Mr. Welcome up and up 4 flights of stairs and down, and then up 4 flights and stairs and down again. Herman Friedman here, a local businessman, a philanthropist, and Deborah Selman, an activist. And behind Herman, a man named Kelvin Barnes. And Kelvin earned part of his living by being a personal assistant for Mr. Welcome. So this is an example of your tax money in action. This is public policy. Kelvin being paid to help Mr. Welcome on an everyday basis. And I would just say, in my experience, there are people that do this work of personal assistant, and some people do it as a job, and some people do it as a calling. And Kelvin was a man that did this work as a calling. Pat Puckett, who has done an awful lot of work in the Georgia General Assembly around issues that affect people with disabilities and other dependencies, if you will. And she came down for the screening. Mary Welcome Williams, and as Mr. Welcome became more well known and people rallied around him, it turned out that there was family that could reconnect, but people had sort of lost touch with each other over the decades. Mr. Welcome won a big award, a national award, from the Association for People with Severe Handicaps, a international award, the International Collaboration Award, and he wanted to go to Seattle to pick up his award, and so people kind of got organized and headed out to Seattle. And here you see Jillian Grable, who had helped produce the video out in Seattle with Mr. Welcome, looking sharp. I would point out the London fog on Mr. Welcome's lap. Susan bought him that. And the reason she bought him that was so he wouldn't have to have a blanket on his feet, because a blanket would send the unconscious signal of infirmity, and the London fog sends the unconscious signal of business. Mr. Welcome in what I would describe as his weathered traveler look. Mr. Welcome's acceptance speech: my name is Waddie Welcome, and I thank you for this honor. I've been blessed to have family, neighbors, church, friends. My oldest friend, my deepest friend, is Ms. Addie Reeves. She's 97 years old and told me if God had meant for her to fly, she'd have wings. So she did not come to be with you here today. And I hope you can learn some of life's lessons from Jillian Grable's video, Waddie Welcome, a man who cannot be denied. In the video, you'll meet Mrs. Reeves and a woman named Deborah Selman. Don't try to cross them. That's a lesson that a lot of people in Savannah have learned. And again, thank you for this honor and the speech and 1,000 people, a standing ovation. Quite a day. Later that year, Jillian Grable married Judge Johnny Mason up in Atlanta. Mr. Welcome wanted to go up for the wedding, and so again, people got organized and up folks went. And you see Mr. Welcome here with Judge Johnny Mason, Jillian's new husband, and Mr. Welcome now is getting to know some of the more influential political folks around the state and getting webbed into the legal community. And then Mr. Welcome and friends wanted to host a birthday party for Mrs. Reeves, her 96th birthday. So people got organized and had a big birthday party over at Jane Fishman's house. And here you'll see State Representative Regina Thomas in the yellow and Mrs. Reeves in the pink there. And there are 2 women from Mrs. Reeves' church that are in Jane Fishman's doorway there. They are about 60 years old, African-American women. I'm pretty sure this was the first time they'd ever been in a white person's house for a social event. And of course it rained, you know, no way around that. And yes, Mrs. Reeves did blow out all 96 candles. And then a big birthday party for Mr. Welcome, his 85th birthday on the 4th of July. Again, back over at Jane Fishman's house. And then in December of 1999, the newspaper Connect Savannah ran an issue about the 10 most influential people of the decade or century in Savannah. And John Barrett got one of those because he wrote the book, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And Jack Kingston got one of those. It reads, "His integrity generates broad political support." Remember, this is a historical document. And then Mr. Waddie Welcome, one of the 10 most influential people of the decade. Waddie Welcome, surprising new leader. It goes on, after 10 years of labor and toil, Mr. Welcome and his friends and allies won. Mr. Welcome's message was ripe for Medicaid law, and Medicaid laws that had grown ineffective and obsolete. And then in hopes of lobbying legislators, copies of his video were forwarded to state representatives, et cetera, et cetera. And it goes on. Waddie Welcome, a man of few words, an agent of change, a surprising new leader.
In November of 2000, after living in 4 different family homes, Mr. Welcome decided that he wanted to move back in with Jeff Alden. They had continued to be close over the years, and Jeff was familiar with the care that Mr. Welcome needed. Among the things they had in common were their faith, a sense of humor, an appreciation of women, and a love of shoot-'em-up westerns. Jeff made his light-filled front room into a bedroom where Mr. Welcome could look out at the oak trees in the yard. He built a ramp and found a used van with a wheelchair lift. They were looking forward to some good times. Mr. Welcome had been having some health problems, which resulted in a hospitalization. The circle members were surprised when his health suddenly deteriorated and he was placed on a ventilator in the intensive care unit. During all of December, he remained in the ICU. We took turns visiting every day, 6 visits a day for 29 days. It was intense. Jeff brought Mrs. Reeves, the nieces and their children came. Alberta Parker, who Mr. Welcome had lived with before moving to Jeff's, came almost every day. Lester Johnson chose Mr. Welcome's cardiologist and asked him to oversee his hospital care because they both attended the same small mosque. Deborah brought a bulletin board for Mr. Welcome's ICU room to display photos of him with Senator Jack Kingston and other prominent civic leaders. A scrapbook of pictures and newspaper stories about Mr. Welcome was placed on the workspace just outside his room, where doctors and nurses stood to have informal consultations. Nurses who gave good care were sent personal thank yous, and letters were written to their supervisors. Word traveled quickly about staff that seemed less skilled or concerned. Lester, Deborah, Jeff, and I sat in a circle in the family waiting room and held hands. We prayed. We cried and hugged each other. We bargained. We did what all the other families were doing. We met with the doctors and were told that Mr. Welcome had liver cancer, and there was little chance of him going home from the hospital. We agreed that we'd be happy if Mr. Welcome could have just one day at home off the ventilator. We thought we knew him well enough to guess that would be what he wanted. We hoped we'd get the chance to ask him, and amazingly, we did. Beating the odds as he had done his entire life, Waddie Welcome improved enough to be taken off the ventilator. He could breathe on his own. A week later, he was able to go home. We knew the cancer was fast-moving, as the oncologist in meeting with 4 of us had said, 2, 3 months maybe. Although we feared he would spend his last few days in pain, that didn't happen. When Jeff called me at 2:30 in the morning telling me to come over right away, I was a little surprised. Earlier that night when I had visited, Mr. Welcome had seemed comfortable. But when I got there, his breathing was very rapid and shallow, and although I had never seen anyone dying, it did seem like that was happening. Mr. Welcome was going to teach us one last lesson. Jeff and I sat on either side of his recliner and touched him gently, reassuring him we were there, although he didn't show any response. Jeff read the Bible aloud. Faye Jones, who had done Mr. Welcome's morning care every day, came in about an hour later. She clearly knew him well and loved him. Faye took my place rubbing Mr. Welcome's forehead, and I sat and rubbed his feet. His breathing was shallow, but he seemed peaceful. We told him we loved him, and we knew he had to go, and that it was okay. Faye said over and over, "Go on, soldier, take your rest." What a perfect word for Mr. Welcome. He was a soldier in so many ways. In the early morning, Jeff and Faye gently carried Mr. Welcome from his lazy boy recliner to his bed. Jeff hadn't slept since the night before, so we sent him to lie down. I sat in Mr. Welcome's chair. Faye stood by him. In minutes, Faye said, "Susan, go get Jeff." We got back to Mr. Welcome and stood, all touching him. He breathed several times, then stopped. Jeff put his palm on Mr. Welcome's chest and said, "He's gone." I could not believe it. A second earlier, he was breathing and alive. Waddie Welcome was born on July 4th, 1914. He died January 14th, Martin Luther King holiday Sunday, 2001.
His funeral was a fitting tribute to the man he was. The church, full of family, friends, circle members, church members, people from all over Savannah, really, that Mr. Welcome had touched. They were black, white, old, young. Some walked into the church, some wheeled into the church. There were out-of-town guests. Marcel Reedus, the filmmaker, was there. The choir sang, and the pastor, Reverend Mitchell, eulogized him. Ms. Reeves, now 99, sat right up front. A letter from Governor Barnes offering condolences to the family on the passing of this important man. The First Lady joins me in conveying our deepest sympathy for the death of Waddie Welcome. His passing leaves a void in our community and in our hearts. All Georgians can take pride in the life of this amazing man. Marcy and I share in your sorrow and will keep you in our thoughts and prayers in the days ahead. Governor Roy Barnes. Mr. Welcome was carried to Laurel Grove Cemetery where his parents are buried. Mr. Welcome got one of what a friend of mine calls the big boy obituaries. And, you know, if you've grown up in Savannah, I mean, you kind of know what this is about. And these days, as you know, you just buy the amount of space you want and make your obituary as big as you want it. But he got it the old-fashioned way. He earned it. Mrs. Reeves, of course, took Mr. Welcome's passing hard, but her faith helped her. But a broken hip at the age of 99 was too much. And at the age of 100 years and 30 days, she passed on to a place that she knew would be a better place. From the Savannah Morning News. They say the good die young. They never met Miss Addie Reeves of Savannah. Miss Reeves, who died Monday this week at the age of 100, was living proof of the power of one. The longtime resident was well known in her church, Connor's Temple, her neighborhood, mostly Yamacraw Village and Caton Homes, and the wider community for her generosity, strength, compassion, and belief in human dignity. She touched and inspired hundreds, if not thousands, of people. She was best known for standing up for a former neighbor, Waddie Welcome, who was sent to an out-of-town nursing home after his family died, his parents died. Mr. Welcome, who died a year ago at the age of 86, had cerebral palsy. He was a black man in a wheelchair who was easy to overlook. Ms. Reeves had limited resources, but she possessed a backbone of titanium. With the help of Chatham-Savannah Citizen Advocacy, she brought Mr. Welcome back to Savannah. A native of Burke County, Ms. Reeves was one of 10 children who grew up on a farm and learned the value of work and of cooking. If people went away hungry after sitting down at her table, it was their fault. A funeral service is scheduled at 12:30 p.m. today at Connor's Temple with burial near the family home place. While her death is sad, her life is cause for celebration. If one woman changed her corner of the world, think what could happen if others would follow her example. Here were her lessons of life. Live and try to treat everybody right, even the ones doing you wrong. Keep in the hands of God and go on. I don't care anything about style. Want to look beautiful? Serve God. Addie Reeves was a beautiful woman. Years later, people raised money to have a marker erected at Mr. Wlcome's grave. Here you see Mary Wlcome Williams and her two boys. And the marker reads, beloved son, brother, uncle, friend, and teacher. Lester Johnson told a little story that day. He had been a student at St. Mary's Catholic School in the 1950s, which is in the Kohler Brownsville neighborhood. And he told the story that, and Lester told us that he was a good boy. And I believe Lester. I think Lester was a good boy. But Lester told us that sometimes bad boys would get hold of him and talk about, and they'd want to leave the church, the school grounds and go down to the confectionery that Reverend Stokes ran and maybe get some chocolate milk and like a moon pie or a honey bun. And so, and then sometimes somebody said they didn't have enough money. And somebody said, that's okay, I know another place we can go. We can go around to the treat store. Well, the treat store was where Mr. Wlcome was guarding his mother's treats. But then somebody would say, I don't want to go around there because we'll see the monster. And Lester told us that since he had gotten to know Mr. Wlcome, when his friends would come back to Savannah, almost always, if I remember right, to bury a parent or an uncle or an aunt, and you would go to the funeral, of course, you would see people you'd grown up with and gone to school with. And you would say to them that you would say, you won't believe this, but remember the man that was on that porch? You know, he's a friend of mine now. And Lester said that people literally couldn't believe it. And we need to think about that a little bit. Because, you know, what we believe has so much to do with what can happen in the world. People literally couldn't believe it. Mr. Wlcome, indeed an unexpected teacher to Lester in this part of Lester's life. And always back for food and fellowship, because you have to keep the social in social change. Well, Waddie Wlcome was all those things that you've heard about tonight, but he was also a little bit of a kidnapper. He had a way of catching your eye with his eyes, those fierce eyes, those intense eyes. He had a way of holding you with that smile, that quick laugh. Mr. Wlcome kidnapped Mrs. Reeves many, many years ago, and then he kidnapped, and they've been a team for over 50 years. Mr. Wlcome kidnapped me in a nursing home. That's when I first met him. I took Lester Johnson to meet him, and he kidnapped Lester. And then he grabbed Deborah Selman and Jeff Alden, and then Susan Earl. He kidnapped Susan's daughter, Emily. He kidnapped my family. He kidnapped Lester's office staff. He kidnapped Sandy Mold and Wayne Daughtry and showed them that you didn't have to say kidnapped in a nursing home. Mr. Wlcome had a way of capturing people and not letting go until you were a little better person. And Lord, if Mr. Wlcome didn't manage to kidnap you and turn you into a better person, his teammate, Miss Reeves, would. And you know how she works. First, it's have a biscuit. Then how about some stewed chicken and dumplings? And then it's do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And then you'd realize that the lady who was actually saying it was living it as well. Mrs. Reeves kidnapped Jane Fishman and Linda Whittish and bunches of others. Yep, Mr. Wlcome was all those things that we've talked about already, but a little bit of a kidnapper too. Here's a little story about how he grabbed two people from Cleveland, Ohio, and let them go as better people. We were screening the Waddie Welcome, A Man Who Cannot Be Denied video at the Ralph Mark Gilbert Civil Rights Museum. And it was a hot Saturday night. We'd rented the museum, had 150 people come. It was a busy, busy night in the museum. Many of Mr. Wlcome's family, church members had come. The Savannah Morning News was there. As the evening wound down, a lovely young African-American couple came into the small front lobby of the museum from Cleveland, in town as tourists, and seeing the museum bustling with people, they assumed it was open. They stepped in and took a moment to get their bearings, and taking in the mixture of white, black, old, young, standing, wheeling, and reclining people, I heard the young woman ask a museum staff person, "What's going on here?" And the staff person said, "We're here to honor Mr. Wlcome," and nodded in his direction. The young woman's face first went to puzzled, and then to reflective, and then to a soft smile with moist eyes. She had, I believe, just glimpsed at a world better than the one she'd stepped out of or would be stepping back into, and I think she knew it. And that, my friends, was, is, and will always be the power of this man named Waddie Welcome. At first, he's a puzzlement to most people. Then to many people, he brings reflection and insight. And to some, a great and growing number of people around the world, really, he brings hope. Hope of a better world, a world where there's more listening, more laughter, and more love. Waddie Welcome brought all three of these things, more listening, more laughter, and more love, to life in his life. And the congregation, of course, would say, Amen.
The beloved community is not a utopia, but a place where the barriers between people gradually come down, and where the citizens make a constant effort to address even the most difficult problems of ordinary people. It is, above all else, an idealistic community.
Thank you. Thank you.